Philosophers Who Failed at Love by Andrew Shaffer, Part 2. Let's see if we can get through this book today. We're on René Descartes. It's quite the fancy guy. Look at him. It is easy to hate, and it is difficult to love. October 15th, 1634. The fateful night that French philosopher René Descartes, the man now known as the father of modern philosophy and analytical geometry, lost his virginity to a serving maid, Helene Jean. The single night of passion resulted in an illegitimate child. Descartes never married Helene, but he did gain custody of their daughter Francine. He loved Francine very much and was excited about educating her. Unfortunately, she died of scarlet fever at the age of 5. And Descartes, a devout Roman Catholic, repented for his fornication and dedicated himself to a celibate existence. God quickly raised him above his sin. His biographer, Adrian Baillet, wrote, he entered into the most emotionally intimate relationship of his life several years later with Princess Elizabeth, the 25-year-old daughter of Frederick, King of Bohemia. Descartes was 47 when he and the princess first wrote to each other in 1643. After just a year of exchanging letters, Descartes dedicated his book Principles of Philosophy to her. They met only a handful of times, but corresponded extensively until Descartes' death in 1650. Elizabeth was his closest correspondent toward the end of his life, and it was to some extent because of her great interest in his intellectual endeavors that he pursued the passion so assiduously, wrote the biographer Stephen Gochbroker about Descartes' masterpiece, Passions. Although the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy asserts that the book was a result of the probing Princess Elizabeth, there was, alas, no probing going on between the two. In his own words, The Passion of Descartes, it is quite likely that Descartes believed Princess Elizabeth was his soulmate, if not in body, then at least in spirit. Love is a motion of the soul caused by a movement of the spirits which impels the soul to join itself by will to objects that appear to be agreeable to it. Descartes wrote in one of the few actually passionate sections in Passions. John Dewey, from 1859 to 1952. There's that fancy guy. Love's garden is a stony place with weeds. An American educational theorist, John Dewey was a college student at Johns Hopkins University. He was so painfully shy that the university president, Daniel Coit Gilman, actually advised him not to be so bookish. Don't live such a secluded life. Get out and see people, Gilman told Dewey. Turns out that Dewey just needed to find the right girl. Shortly after meeting Alice Chipman in a university class, he began talking about marriage. There was a full-size moral intellectual admiration between them, wrote Dewey's student Max Eastman. No two people were ever more in love. Dewey once told Eastman in July 1886, after Alice graduated from college and Dewey was promoted to assistant professor, they married. The moral and intellectual admiration was not enough to keep Dewey entirely faithful over the next 4 decades of their marriage. Andia Jezierska, a Polish Jezierska. I'm pretty sure I'm saying that right. Where was I? Andia Jezierska, a Polish-American writer who was 20 years old, Dewey's junior, sat in on his lectures at Columbia College. The good professor had a short-lived but emotional affair with her in 1918. Physically, their relationship appears not to have advanced beyond light petting. Biographer Robert B. Westbrook wrote, Dewey's wife Alice passed away in 1927, nearly 2 decades later when he was 87. Dewey married Roberta Grant, 42-year-old widow. They did not announce their marriage because Dewey feared that she would face criticisms due to the difference in their ages. Still, Dewey's second marriage caused rifts between him and his children. Evelyn, Dewey's daughter from his first marriage, warned her father's friends that Roberta was pouring evil fantasies into Dewey's head. Roberta was a paranoid and a liar, according to biographer Sidney Hook. Estranged from his family and friends, Dewey passed away quietly at the age of 92. In his own words, not so great love letters of great men. Despite his considerable verbal prowess in other areas, Dewey's love letters to Alice were so extraordinarily unsophisticated that the reader can only suppose that the writer of these lacked practice in opening his heart to anyone. The biographer Alan Ryan, is he being too harsh on the man? Read the following excerpts from Dewey's letters yourself and read the following excerpts from Dewey's letters yourself and be the judge. Sorry, I'm losing my tone. Alright. As you can see, I get extra enthusiastic talking about failed love. I feel like I've dropped a couple of octaves. Alright, anyway. Sweetest, when are you coming back to bless me with the beloved joy beyond joy of your love? Loved one of my soul, myself, my own true self, my awakener of life. And desire, my fullness of life and satisfaction of want, my source of all that I can be and giver of all that I am. Do I say that I love you? Oh, my lover darling, it is the thought that I can give you love which thrills me through and through with the joy of life. My love, how your love fills everything. Darling, it is me and everything about me. I am it and I am in it. My own love. And it is the sweetness of the world. Darling, how can I but love you with my life, with my being, with my all? Which yet is not mine, but yours, sweet one. Yeah, he was really enthusiastic about that. Dennis Diderot, 1713 to 1784. Gotta give it to him, these guys were lookers. It has been said that love robs those who have it of their wit, and gives it to those who have none. When Dennis Diderot decided to become a writer at the age of 21, he had already attempted and failed at careers as a clergyman, a doctor, and a lawyer. All these other occupations paid more. Diderot's heart was set on the literary life. For the next 10 years, he lived hand to mouth, making money doing translations, writing sermons, and tutoring students. The bohemian existence has been often made to sound romantic on paper, yet it was squalid and shabby enough in reality. Author Evelyn Beatrice Hall wrote of Diderot's struggles to make it as a freelance writer in the 18th century France. In 1743, Diderot was lodging with a poor seamstress and her mother. The seamstress, Antoinette Champion, was uneducated, but she captured the philosopher's heart nonetheless. To spark a relationship, he asked Antoinette to sew him an outfit, claiming that he would be entering the Jesuit seminary and was in dire need of clothing. He had no such plans. He lied. Luckily for him, Diderot's skillful banter was more charming than the elaborate ruse would suggest. They were soon married. And Diderot's jealousy quickly got the better of him. He asked his new wife to stop sewing, afraid that her business would bring her into contact with other desperate bachelors looking for love. With only Diderot's sporadic sources of income and Antoinette's mother's meager savings, the threesome continued to live in poverty. The ever-popular Diderot was often asked to dine out with his friends, and always went, while at home his wife and mother-in-law feasted on dry bread, Hall wrote. In addition to the inevitable fights over money that ensued, Diderot found the realities of married life constrictive to his bohemian sensibilities. He decided that passions could not be contained by a senseless vow like marriage. What a noble aim is it that a zealot who tortures himself like a madman in order to desire nothing and love nothing. He wrote, "Lovers are passions to be pursued, not held captive." While Antoinette was away visiting family, Diderot began an affair with Madame de Poisil. Madame was a clothes hound. She drained Diderot of what money he did have, but ironically provided the muse for some of his best-known works, Essay on Merit and Virtue, and Philosophical Thoughts. One day she showed up to visit Diderot, dressed in extravagant clothes that he had not bought for her. Diderot followed her and caught her with another man. The jealous philosopher renounced her as easily and hotly as he had fallen in love with her, according to Hall. His next infatuation was with Sophie Voland. They traded letters for 28 years, many of which were later burned by Diderot's wife. Scholars have speculated that Diderot and Voland were lovers, but any concrete evidence of such an affair likely went up in flames. Diderot's writing eventually made him famous, and he became a wealthy man when he sold his personal library of books to Catherine the Great. His wife gave birth to a daughter, but their troubled marriage never improved. His depression following Sophie Voland's death in 1784 did not help matters. 9 months after Voland passed away, Diderot died suddenly while eating an apricot at the dinner table with his family. His last words were, "What possible harm could it do to me?" Killed you. In his own words, burn after eating. Many of Diderot's love letters to Sophie Voland were unsurprisingly burned by his wife, but some survived. July 17th, 1957. I am wholly yours. You are everything to me. We will sustain each other in the ills of life. It may please fate to inflict upon us. You will soothe my troubles. I will comfort you in yours. Is it not true, my dear Sophie, that you are very amiable? Examine yourself, see how worthy you are of being loved, and know that I love you very much. I am as happy as a man can be in knowing that I am loved by the best of women. October 20th, 1759. You love me. You will always love me. I believe you. Now I'm happy. I live again. I can talk, work, play, walk, do anything you wish. I would love you even more than I do if I knew how. This kind of brings me to a point I would kind of like to bring up before we throw Diogenes under the bus. But so with the jealousy aspect of that relationship, it's interesting, right? He meets his wife. He's like, and he meets her under certain circumstances. He gets jealous immediately. He's like, you have to quit your job. You're not allowed to do shit. You get to sit here and feast on dry bread while I'm going to be out feasting with my friends. And, all the women that I want, that's, my prerogative, whatever, right? Well, his wife is at home suffering, starving, and he's romancing other women, and she's burning these letters, so she's fully aware of what's going on. And that's quite interesting, isn't it? It's usually the ones who are so jealous, that, they project their own sins onto you, right? They're because they themselves are that way, they will seek it in you. They want to see, they'll look for their sins in you. And when you don't have them, they will they'll try to, materialize it in a certain way or draw you in a certain light to feed their little fantasy or delusion of who they've made you out to be in their head, right? Which is them, right? They always make you out to be them in their head. What people seek in you, see in them, okay? If people don't trust you, they're not trustworthy. If people are constantly trying to see if you're lying, it's probably because they're dishonest people. Honest people seek truth. Bottom line. Trustworthy people trust people, because they don't they don't intuitively, or they don't instinctively go, you know what, somebody's going to be a piece of shit to me, because they're not inherently a piece of shit, right? So pay attention to how people are with you. I feel like, and this is why philosophers typically dial in, though, because I feel like, a lot of us have picked up on that fact. Just look what they seek in you. If they seek love, truth, and happiness, then that's really what they know of themselves to be true, Then those are traits that they hold within themselves. Diogenes the Cynic. This guy is actually one of my favorite philosophers ever. Great guy. So he lived from 412 to 323 BC. Marriage is never any good to a man, and we must be quite content if it does no harm. Diogenes the Cynic fought a lifelong battle against customs and traditions in the Greek world. His philosophy held what is natural cannot be wrong. He took this as an excuse to fart, urinate, defecate, and masturbate in public. Nevertheless, Diogenes was an entertaining character, and well liked by his fellow Athenians. Alexander the Great is said to have been a fan of the eccentric philosopher, marking, "If I were not Alexander, I should wish to be Diogenes." Which is kind of funny because Diogenes literally told Alexander the Great to get out of his sunlight. When Alexander the Great came to talk to him personally, he's like, "Get out of the sun. You're blocking the sunlight." Which says a lot about Diogenes. Like, most people would be like, stammering and trying to impress Alexander the Great, trying to uphold that conversation with him, but not Diogenes. Diogenes was like, "Psh, you're just as much a man as I am. Now get out of the fucking sunlight." The historical record is ambiguous as to whether Diogenes ever fell in love. It is likely he never did, especially in light of his flagrant behavior. He did not believe that a truly wise man could ever be in love. Love, Diogenes said, is the province of men with nothing to do. An ironic sentiment coming from a man who slept outdoors in a wine barrel and begged for change during the day. I lost it for a second. Where was I? There we go. In his own words, the perfect gift. Diogenes abhorred social conventions such as marriage. Humans have complicated every simple gift of the gods, he said, reasoning that marriage needlessly complicated the natural gift of sex. He proposed an alternative society in which men and women would be possessed in common by men. Instead of being paired off in monogamous marriages, men and women would be able to change sex partners as often as they liked in Diogenes' perfect world. Which, according to history, is kind of everyone's perfect world, right? I mean, all these stories, it's just people cheating on people, and maybe, as a species, humans are not really monogamous. Let's be real. I heard a quote once that, it said, "Oh yes, I am monogamous with every one of my partners, and so, or with every partner I've had, or something like that. And which is funny because true monogamy is finding one partner and staying with them until you die. But, and we are very polyamorous in nature. We might not have multiple partners at a time, You might do the whole, like, I'm only with one person at a time. But you're not really only experiencing one partner in your lifetime, so it's not monogamy. Need to burst your bubble. That's not really how the humans are rigged. Despite every attempt that humans make on it, right? All humans try like mad. They all want to be monogamous. They just can't ever seem to be satisfied with just one person in their life. They always end up with more. So anyway, Fyodor Dostoevsky, 1821 to 1881. Look at that. That guy looks like he's going through some shit. Love in action is a harsh and dreadful thing compared with love in dreams. Dostoevsky. Russian author Fyodor Dostoevsky, whose work influenced the 20th century existentialists such as Albert Camus and Jean-Paul Sartre, met Maria Dmitrievna Isayeva while serving as a private in the Siberian Regiment in 1856. Their chances of hooking up were improbable. She was already married and, in contrast to the gloomy Dostoevsky, was both attractive and vivacious. I do not think that she highly esteemed him. Their mutual friend, Baron Alexander Rongel, wrote, "It was more that she pitied him. In love with him, she most decidedly never was. Maria saw Dostoevsky as a poor man without a future. Still, she apparently pitied him enough to marry him in 1857 after her first husband passed away. Their relationship was a rocky one. We were both thoroughly unhappy, but could not cease from loving one another. The more wretched we were, the more we clung together." Dostoevsky later wrote in a letter to Wrangel, "In fact, the more unhappy we became, the closer our bond became, no matter how strange that may seem. It was so. When Dostoevsky was diagnosed with epilepsy, he received a medical discharge from the army and returned with his bride to his hometown of St. Petersburg. The move turned to be fatal to Maria. She had tuberculosis, and the damp climate in the new city exacerbated her condition. While her health deteriorated, the 40-year-old Dostoevsky began a romantic relationship with 22-year-old writer Apollinaria Suslova in 1862. She remained his mistress for the next couple of years, but the situation was mutually unsatisfactory. They broke off relations in 1864. The thinly veiled autobiographical narrator of Dostoevsky's novel, The Gambler, written near the end of his affair with Suslova, has this to say: "There were moments, every time we ended a conversation, as a matter of fact, when I would have given up half my life to strangle her. I swear that had I the chance to thrust a sharp knife slowly into her bosom, I believe I would have done it with delight." Following his breakup with Suslova, Dostoevsky spent more time attending to his sick wife while he was writing Notes from the Underground. He listened to his wife's hacking cough in the next room. "Every day there's a moment when we expect her to die," he wrote. She finally did so on April 15th, 1864. And his journal entry from the next day is heartbreaking in its brevity. April 16th. April 16th. Maria, is lying on the table. Will I ever see Masha again? Charlie, quit attacking him. Quit attacking him. Alright. His wife's death began a dark time in Dostoevsky's life. His brother passed away shortly thereafter. Dostoevsky's gambling addiction worsened and his debts mounted exponentially. A half-hearted proposal to his former mistress Suslova was rejected. Redemption would come for him in the form of a 20-year-old stenographer, Anna Grigorievna Snitskina. In October 1866, Dostoevsky hired Snitskina to transcribe his work. It was not love at first sight. Nothing can convey the pitiful appearance of Fyodor. When I met him for the first time, he seemed confused, anxious, helpless, lonely, irritable, and almost ill, she wrote of the 46-year-old author. As he dictated his writing to her, an attraction grew in both of their hearts. After working together for less than a month, he tossed out an idea to her for a new novel about an elderly artist who falls in love with a young woman named Anna. Would it be possible for such a relationship to work, he asked. It would, she responded, because true love is not confined to appearances. Growing more confident that his gambit would succeed, he ventured further. Put yourself in her place. Imagine that this artist, that is I, confessed that he loved you and asked you to be his wife. What would you say? She did not hesitate in her response. I would answer that I love you and will love you all my life. They were married 3 months later. The early years of their marriage were tainted by Dostoevsky's gambling problems. He rewarded his new wife's tolerant attitude toward his behavior by pawning her jewelry and wedding ring. Anna eventually recovered the ring after his children were born. Dostoevsky's gambling slowed, and although they continued to experience financial difficulty, Dostoevsky and Anna enjoyed a tranquil family life until he passed away in 1881. In his own words, live and let die. There was no point in holding a grudge following a failed relationship, Dostoevsky reasoned. The changing tides of romance did not bother him. We should be eternally grateful to a woman whom we have loved for every day and hour of joy which she has given us. We may not demand from her that she think of us only all her life long. We may not demand from her that she think of us only all her life long. Okay, I did say that right. That is kind of a lot. I mean, if you think about it, like, their marriage kind of demanding that somebody loves you for the rest of your life, or kind of expecting somebody to love you for the rest of your life. It almost feels entitled. But, it is what it is. I like to perceive forever in the present moment. Alright? Forever comes, forever goes. Friedrich Engels, 1820 to 1895. Kind of looks like the last guy. Examples of faithful monogamy among birds do not furnish any proofs for men, for we are not descended from birds. True. German socialist Friedrich Engels did not believe that monogamy was a natural state of man. We literally just talked about that. That's funny. I also agree with that. I don't believe that that's the case. He dismissed anecdotal evidence in animals as irrelevant to the argument. He wrote, if strict monogamy is a height of virtue, then the palm belongs to the tapeworm that carries a complete male and female sexual apparatus in each of its 50 to 200 sections, and passes its whole lifetime in fertilizing itself in every one of its sections. This is a fair point. It's like, kind of like, if you were meant to be with one thing your whole life, you would have been born with it, right? I would also say that, like, there could have been some cognitive dissonance in the fact that he would be dismissive of anecdotal evidence in animals, but I feel like he was being realistic in the fact that he um, witnessed the evidence for himself, in humans, because we could study animals all day long and not really understand the nature of humans. Humans are kind of a different breed. Ingalls lived by his word, rarely tying himself down to one woman throughout his lifetime. In an 1846 letter, Friedrich Engels tried to persuade his good friend Karl Marx to visit him in Paris. If I had an income of 5,000 francs, I would do nothing but work and amuse myself with women until I went to pieces. If there were no French women, life wouldn't be worth living. But so long as there are grisettes, well and good. Grisettes were working-class French women. They worked in the garment industry by day and flirted with men by night. They were not prostitutes, at least not all of them, but they had an infamous reputation for being easy. Still, Engels condemned prostitution as the most tangible exploitation, one directly attacking the physical body of the proletariat by the bourgeoisie. This also, I would have to say, if you notice in the history of, like, the working class, women, right? Like, typically, back before women were working, they were kind of, like, confined to these, like, moral regulations and stuff. Whereas when women kind of entered the workforce, women got to experience life kind of as a man, or from the perspective of a man. And a lot of them enjoyed that, right? Let's be real, because they are also part of that human nature, right? They also have that nature of, needing to experience more than one person in a lifetime, right? That's not something to be ashamed of, but like, that's something to be admired. I think that, because every experience you have with a person activates growth and expansion in some way, and so it really is more beneficial to a person in their lifetime to have experienced that. That's where you grow from. People who don't experience that, people who just stay virginal and innocent their whole lives, or sheltered their whole lives, when they do come out of that, like, then they kind of, like, go apeshit. I mean, we see it, like, those kids who were raised by pastors or pastors' kids. They all grow up and then they, like, get all hypersexualized and they want to, like, go all into the world and party and all that. I know, I dated a pastor's kid. They're wild fucking people. And the thing about that too is, like, it's just our inherent nature will always kind of come to light. And I feel like women were given an opportunity to experience life from that perspective and to perhaps, reflect to men what men have done to them for so long, as we've read so far, right? So anyway, back to this. Engels enjoyed many female companions, from the aforementioned grisettes in Paris to a pair of illiterate Irish sisters whom he dated in succession. He even married one of the sisters, Lizzie Burns, despite the intense dislike of marriage. It turns out that the civil ceremony was entirely charitable gambit on Engels' part, as he wed Lizzie on her deathbed. Okay, it sounds like some shit I would do. Marry them right before they die. Yeah. When Karl Marx fathered a child with his housekeeper, Helene Demuth, Engels stepped in to protect his married friend's reputation. When paternity rumors began circulating, Engels deflected suspicion from Marx by hinting that it was his, and not Marx's son. This explanation sufficed for Marx's wife, apparently, since Demuth never lost her job as a housekeeper in the Marx household. The boy's father's identity was kept secret until Engel's deathbed confession. In his own words, the Swingers Manifesto, the nuclear family, husband, wife, and children, was a bourgeois product of capitalism. According to Marx and Engels' Communist Manifesto, this traditional family structure was founded on capital, on private gain. They went a step further, damning all marriages as restrictive. All that this Protestant monogamy achieves is a conjugal partnership of leaden boredom, known as domestic bliss, right? Engels believed that things would change once the communist revolution came to fruition. True equality between men and women can become a reality only when the exploitation of both by capital has been abolished, which I feel like we're starting to experience in present day occurrences. So shout out to Engels, my boy. Without private property, traditional families would disintegrate and the wife swapping would commence. I feel like, as we already know, this is just kind of what happens with people, right? We already know. We see it. We see it in our celebrities. Hell, I'm pretty sure some of us have even had pastors who've gone through a couple wives and things like that. It is not human. We're not fucking penguins. We're not anglerfish, right? That's just not how we operate. We learn and we grow. And if we find somebody that can follow us in life through companionship, that's a blessing. Sometimes it's not, though. Sometimes that could be a curse, not being able to get rid of a partner. Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, 1749 to 1832. Alright, here. Can you see this, man? Alright, there you go. Love is an ideal thing. Marriage is a real thing. A confusion of the real with the ideal never goes unpunished. There we go. See, all these philosophers really do articulate it well. Like, you gotta give them that. Johann Wolfgang von Goethe was one of the first German romantics to turn suffering into an art form. He developed a series of crushes on unattainable women over the course of his life, resulting in a perpetually broken heart that fueled his writing. Same. He first fell in love at the tender age of 15 with one of his schoolmates. She gave her hand to no one, not even to me. She allowed no touch, yet she many times seated herself near me. Goethe wrote optimistically of the unnamed girl. If, however, I ventured toward her, she withdrew. At one point, he succeeded in getting a kiss from the young woman, planted squarely on his forehead. It was the first and last time that she granted me this favor, for alas, I was not to see her again. She left town. Goethe was later crushed to hear that she had referred to him as a child. Her cold and repelling manner, which had before so charmed me, now seemed to me quite repugnant. He wrote, "This arrow with its barbed hooks was torn out of my heart." Yeah, that shit hurts. Unrequited love. Young Goethe became depressed. He did not eat or sleep well. The effects of the affair remained with Goethe throughout his life. He refers to it as his great misfortune in his autobiography, lamenting that she had been taken away from him when clearly he had never possessed her in the first place. As an adult, he fell madly in love with his friend Charlotte von Stein. There are no indications that she reciprocated his feelings. She was married and had 7 children competing for her attention, yet Goethe made no attempts to conceal his infatuation with her and made overtures toward her for the 12 years that he lived near her family. She accepted his friendship, but politely deflected his come-ons. Goethe eventually left for Italy, and they corresponded until her death in 1827. True sexual relationships appear to have been stunted by Goethe's secret love for his younger sister Cornelia. Goethe had a hard time keeping secrets, however, and wrote about their taboo love in his autobiography. She assured me that I was the only one who truly loved, understood, and esteemed her. We both thought ourselves infinitely unhappy, and the more so as in the singular case, the confidants could not change themselves into lovers. Cornelia's marriage shattered his fantasies, but it may have also prompted Goethe to step up his game. He met Christiane Vulpius, the first woman to truly return his feelings. He lost his virginity to her, narrowly avoiding the stigma of being labeled the 40-year-old virgin by less than a year. They lived together as common law man and wife and had several children together, eventually marrying in 1806. After Christiane's death in 1816, he fell in love with another young woman, Ulrich von Levitzow. Okay. Ulrich's mother disliked him. He never worked up the courage to propose to Ulrich. For Goethe, the unattainable was far more romantic anyway. In his own words, the Suicide King. Unrequited love affairs were the plague of Johann Wolfgang von Goethe's existence until he was nearly 40. These affairs, all unconsummated, provided the raw material for his poetry and prose. The book that shot Goethe into the stratosphere of literary superstardom, The Sorrows of Young Werther, was an epistolary novel about a man who falls in love with a married woman. Young Werther's love is not returned in kind. Sometimes I tell myself, my fate is unique, Werther says in a novel. Somebody fell asleep. Consider all other men fortunate, I tell myself. No one has ever suffered like you. Spoiler alert, young Werther, tired of living in a state of agony, shoots himself at the end of the novel. Goethe based the character of Werther on his friend Jerusalem, who had killed himself in the same manner following a love affair. Goethe had often grappled with suicidal thoughts himself. Among a considerable collection of weapons, I possessed a handsome, well-polished dagger. This I laid every night by my bed, and before I extinguished the candle, I tried whether I could succeed in plunging the sharp point a couple of inches deep into my heart. He credits the act of writing Werther for lifting his own symptoms of depression. The novel was to have the opposite effect on the public. And the book was a literary sensation across Europe. Upon its publication in 1774, scores of young, heartbroken men dressed in yellow trousers, blue jackets, and open-necked shirts, emulation of Goethe's protagonist. Unfortunately, many young men also paid tribute to their new hero by committing suicide. Copycat suicides racked up across the continent, for as it requires but a little match to blow up an immense mine, so the explosion which followed my publication was mighty, Goethe wrote. Authorities in Italy, Germany, and Denmark banned the book in an attempt to keep it from completely infecting a generation of disaffected youth. Eventually, the subculture of suffering that the book had spawned fell out of fashion, just like any other fad. And I feel like that trend that started is a good indication of how others in reality kind of feel towards love and their own experiences. George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel. Alright, that's the guy. Very sleepless eyes. Look at that. Sleepless eyes. Okay. 1770 to 1831. And the difference between man and woman is the same between animal and plant. Facts. Let's be real. Let's be real. We are cats and dogs. German philosopher George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel wrote, "Love can only take place towards an equal, the mirror, the echo of our own being. Since humanity was created in God's image, he reasoned, God is the only equal deserving of true love. Earthly romance is but a shallow approximation of divine love." This did not prevent Hegel from fathering an illegitimate son with his landlord's wife, Christiana Burckhardt. Although Christiana was separated from her husband, Hegel feared reprisal from his landlord and left town a month after his child was born. In September 1811, the 40-year-old Hegel married Maria Helena Susanna von Tucher, a svelte woman half his age. And they had 2 sons of their own, and even accepted his illegitimate son by Christiana into their family in 1816. The marriage created a devastating rift between Hegel and his sister Christiane Luan, not to be confused with Christiana Burckhardt, the mother of his first son. Hegel invited Christiane into his family's home to assist with the household chores while his wife was pregnant with their first child. Hegel confided in his sister that his goal in marriage was not happiness, but being contented. As I think that is actually the more honorable path. Shouldn't seek happiness in another person. Happiness lies within. Your partner's, I think that's the best lesson out of this book in general, is your partner is not meant to be your source of happiness. You're your own source of happiness. You're supposed to bring that to the table, So there's that. Christiane, who had always been close to her brother, flew into a rage and left the household, prompting speculation that she had become unnaturally attached to him and could not bear to see him with a woman whom he had admittedly did not love. Hegel feared that his sister was mentally ill and distanced himself and his new family from her. In 1831, three months after Hegel passed away, Christiane confirmed those suspicions when she drowned herself. In his own words, "This one's for the ladies." Hegel's misogynistic beliefs were an anachronism even in the early 19th century, when his contemporary Arthur Schopenhauer called him a lasting monument to German stupidity. Hegel's views have not aged well, as you can see from this brief snippet. Women can, of course, be educated, but their minds are not adapted to the higher sciences. Whew! This boy's gonna get slapped. Philosophy or certain of the arts. Women may have happy inspirations, taste, elegance, but they have not the ideal. Oh my God, he gonna get slapped. The difference between man and woman is the same between animal and plant. The animal corresponds more closely to the character of the man. Why? Because they're bestial and primal? Just wondering. The plant to that of the woman, because she is the... Okay, I get it. But I also disagree with this man, just saying. If women were to control the government, the state would be in danger, for they do not act according to the dictates of universality, but are influenced by accidental inclinations and opinions. First of all, 100% of wars ever started, guess what, chicken butt? Those are started by men. 100% of terrorism in the world, men. So, I would like to see any kind of proof that there's anything on that. for centuries, men have demonized women and called us evil or incapable of great things, and I think honestly, we're like their kryptonite, and I think they're afraid to see us think sometimes. Not all men. Some men are really great, But I mean, those specifically very patriarchal, very like sexist ones. I don't understand that because how do you come from a woman and hate women? It's like coming from God and being like, you know what? Fuck God. Okay. Anyway, Martin Heidegger. Martin Heidegger. Okay, 1889 to 1976. This guy's got a stash for porn. Look at that. Beautiful. Why is love rich beyond all possible human experiences and a sweet burden to those seized in its grasp? We all want to know that, Martin. Alright. German professor Martin Heidegger's work is not recommended for the beginning student of philosophy. His books are filled with maxims such as being is not something like a being. What determines beings as beings, that in terms of which beings are already understood. Thankfully, an advanced degree is not required to understand his love life. Heidegger married Elfriede Petri in 1917. They remained together for nearly 60 years, never separating or divorcing, despite Heidegger's widely documented extramarital activities with his students. Of Heidegger's trysts, his relationship with student Hannah Arendt was the most significant. Dear Miss Arendt, I must see you this evening and speak to your heart, he wrote to his 18-year-old pupil when she visited his University of Marburg office that night. The two made love for the first time. That they were student and teacher was merely an inconvenience, an occasion that happened to them. I will never be able to call you mine, but from now on you will belong in my life, Heidegger wrote to his apt pupil. For the next 4 years, they would carry on a passionate physical affair, meeting in his office in the woods near the university campus. When Heidegger joined the Nazi Party in 1933, the Jewish Arendt fled to America. Post-war Arendt sought to resume her friendship, but not the affair, with Heidegger. Arendt was now married, but still believed that she, and not Elfriede, had been the love of Heidegger's life. After Arendt met with Heidegger in 1950, she publicly defended him against criticism of his Nazi past. Professor Elzbieta Ettinger, author of Hannah Arendt, Martin Heidegger, told the New York Times that no person who knows about love and passion will consider Arendt's forgiveness of Heidegger unusual. Love is irrational, and there's nothing we can do about it. Heidegger's wife's own extramarital activities were eventually revealed. It turns out that their son, Hermann, was actually the fruit of an affair between Mrs. Heidegger and a family friend, a secret only brought to light with the 2005 publication of letters to his wife, 1915 to 1970, a collection of Heidegger's correspondence with his wife. In his own words, the Heidegger Code. Even on a topic such as love, Heidegger's writings were more obfuscating, that's a word, okay, than enlightening. Novice cryptographers are invited to take a crack at deciphering his words. Alright, y'all, I didn't say I was perfect at reading when I started this channel. I am just simply reading to you, so judge me harshly. I can take it. We change ourselves into that which we love, and yet remain ourselves. So maybe we love ourselves. And then we would like to thank the beloved, but find nothing that would do it adequately. We can only be thankful to ourselves. Love transforms gratitude into faithfulness to ourselves and into an unconditional faith to the other. And thus, love steadily expands its most intimate secret. Closeness here is existence in the greatest distance from the other, the distance that allows nothing to dissolve, but rather presents the thou in the transparent but incomprehensible revelation of the just there, that the presence of the other breaks into our own life. This is what no feeling can fully encompass. David Hume, from 1711 to 1776. This man was kind of wealthy. Look at him. Got that powder wig, looking all fancy. Those ruffles, bro. Why don't men dress like that? Those ruffles were on point. Alright. I had my choice of the person with whom I would conjoin myself in marriage. I had my choice, it is true, of my person. But this is a small comfort, since it must still be a prison. According to his colleague, Dennis Diderot, David Hume resembled a well-fed Bernardine monk. The Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy is much kinder to the Scottish economist, calling Hume the most important philosopher ever to write in English. Hume believed that romantic love is derived from the conjunction of three different impressions or passions. 1. The pleasing sensation arising from beauty. 2. The bodily appetite to reproduce. And 3. A generous kindness or goodwill. There is no indication that any of these passions ever resulted in love for Hume himself. The closest thing to a romantic relationship in his life was his friendship with the French socialist Comtesse de Villefleurs. They corresponded before meeting in France in 1763, although they spent much time together over the next year. They never became sexually involved. She eventually dropped him in order to pursue a more appealing lover, the Prince de Conti. Okay, something I would like to mention here. I am noticing a trend. Okay, I'm just saying, I'm noticing a trend. All these unfaithful motherfuckers, they all French. Okay, all of them. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just playing. But damn, the French. I mean. Damn. They really had like their whole like own shit going on, especially during that duration between like 1000 AD to like 1900s. The Comtesse's cold shoulder barely fazed Hume. As I took a particular pleasure in the company of modest women, I had no reason to be displeased with the reception I met with from them. He wrote matter-of-factly, in his own words, the blame game. Hume wrote that women want dominion over men, and men want dominion over women. He found both sexes at fault in this eternal power struggle, but it was man who started it. If we did not abuse our authority over women, they would never think it worthwhile to dispute it. I mean, when you're right. Equality is kind of a thing. It's kind of important. Immanuel Kant. Okay. A lot of my favorite philosophers ended up in here, and I'm a little concerned because I'm like, these are my heroes. Alright, so unfortunately a lot of them are sexist, so a lot of them need to get their shit together. Come back, retry life, okay? Sexual union is the reciprocal use that one human being makes of the sexual organs and capacities of another. German philosopher Immanuel Kant was drier than dust, both in body and mind, according to contemporary Johann Friedrich Reichardt. Kant lived every day according to a set schedule, and the neighbors set their clocks by his evening walks. He never even perspired, not once in his life. It should come as no surprise, then, that his love life was equally dry. Can't believe that premarital sex and any sex acts engaged in for ends other than procreation is immoral. Additionally, sexual desire in itself is wrong since it turns a person into an object. As soon as the person is possessed and the appetite sated, they are thrown away as one throws away a lemon after squeezing the juice from it. Sexual desire is only permissible in marriage when both parties turn each other into equal objects of desire. He equated premarital sex to sexual slavery. Since one's sexuality is given without a contract guaranteeing equality between both parties, it is not only admissible for the sexes to surrender and to accept each other for enjoyment under the condition of marriage, but it is possible for them to do so only under this condition. Kant viewed marriage as a contract for copulation, whereby both parties gain lifelong possession of each other's sexual attributes. It is unsurprising that he never found a woman who agreed with his clinical view of marriage. Over the years, 2 women interested in him, but Kant never pursued either of them. Because he can't! I'm sorry that I had to throw in that. When I needed a wife, I could not support one, he later lamented, citing his poverty as the primary reason he never attempted to tie the knot. In truth, it is inconceivable that Kant would have tolerated any disruption to his highly regimented daily schedule. He potentially could have been autistic. I feel like Kant exhibits a lot of traits of like an autistic adult. As an autistic adult, I'm saying that it's hard to incorporate other people into your life when you've kind of like gotten used to not, you know? It's hard to make those kinds of connections. Handshake. Although Kant had little to no experience with women, it appears that he had even less experience with himself. He refused to even name the ultimate sin of self-stimulation, but we can easily read between the lines that such an unnatural use and so misuse of one's sexual attribute is a violation of duty to oneself, and indeed contrary to morality in its highest degree. Occurs to everyone immediately with the thought of it and stirs up an aversion to this thought to such an extent that it is considered indecent to even call this vice by its proper name. In the case of unnatural vice, it is as if men in general felt ashamed of being capable of treating his own person in such a way, which debases him beneath the beasts. Can't believe that masturbation is a sin worse than even murdering oneself. Suicide, he argued, requires courage. The masturbator is simply giving in weakly to lust. So my views on that. Okay, because you know me, I have to interject every now and then when I'm like, okay, this fool is off the fucking rails. I really disagree on his stance on morality. I don't feel like you need marriage to have a moral connection with somebody. In fact, I feel like marriage sometimes is the bastardization of a connection. What I believe is, okay, if we're all created by the same source, or we all come from the same source in the universe, you know, name it what you will, I'm not here to debate that. But we all come from the same source, right? And, you know, you see dogs, they don't need to get married to mate and to procreate, to do the thing that they're naturally supposed to do, right? Chimps, same thing. Bonobos, same thing. Goldfish, same thing. Anglerfish, same thing. Well, they're kind of married, but you know what I mean. All over the fucking planet, we see millions of species of animals that do not need to get married to have sexual encounters. Are they living in sin? Are they immoral? No, because they're living true to their nature, right? And I feel like a lot of this this whole idea of like carnal sin is kind of ridiculous. Even in ancient Egypt, like they would have like orgies and stuff, and they were totally, you know, just doing their own shit, you know. And I feel like what's cool about ancient Egypt and the way that they, did their things is that, like, they never put sex in a higher pedestal than it needed to be. It was like, okay, so we have sex. This is connection. This is bringing people together, whatever. They also didn't have marriage in ancient Egypt. It was kind of just an agreement. You move in with the person, you're with them, you're married, whatever. There was not like a ceremony. There wasn't rituals around that, which is this ritual around a wedding day is actually very pagan. That's actually invented by the pagans. Kind of funny. They love rituals. But yeah, so marriage is kind of a really new concept to this planet, to this universe, right? It's not something that naturally happens. And so a lot of people hold themselves to this like moral, like, and it's not necessarily always the case, It's like, it's my own situation with marriage, it's like, I feel that marriage it's a compromise sometimes, to even make the decision to marry. But I feel that, if you already plan on being with somebody for the rest of your life, save yourself some fucking money and just be with them. Just be with them. Just make it work, But that's my own personal opinion. It's very unnatural to be married and to have a government govern over your relationship. That doesn't make sense. Not even God would want another human to govern over your relationship. You need to understand that. That's idolatry, having another higher power that ain't your higher power, it's just another fucking person. No. That's my opinion. Soren Kierkegaard. That's how he says it. Soren Kierkegaard. 1813 to 1855. Look at that guy. He got a baby face on him. It's fucking Macklemore in a past life. Look at that shit. Look at those eyeballs. Alright. Love is all. It gives all and it takes all. Soren Kierkegaard, the Danish father of existentialism, first felt the sting of love when he was 24 years old. Regine Olsen, then only 15 years old, caught the moody philosopher's eye. The infatuation temporarily interrupted his perpetual state of melancholy. My God, why should I feel these why should these feelings awaken just now? Oh, how alone I feel, Kierkegaard wrote in his diary regarding his love for the young girl. A true gentleman, Kierkegaard waited until she was 18 to propose to her. I have wanted you for 2 years, he told her after she was of age. She was silent at first, then mentioned that she was seeing one of her former teachers. Kierkegaard didn't care. I have first priority, he said, with authority, and she was silent again. He finally left without an answer. Kierkegaard, not to be discouraged, paid a visit to Regine's father. Her dad said neither yes nor no, but granted the young lover another meeting with his daughter. When Kierkegaard made his second proposal attempt, Regine succumbed to his persistence and accepted. Far from being elated, Kierkegaard's depression worsened. He hid his dark thoughts from his new fiancée so successfully that after a year of engagement, he confidently said that she really did not know me. Rather than infect Regine with his despair, he sought to end the engagement with as little fanfare as possible by breaking up with her via letter. She wrote back that he could do anything with her, absolutely anything, except leave her. For the next 2 months, he acted caddish towards Regine, playing the part of a villain in hopes that his beloved would leave him. Kierkegaard reflected that the time was fearfully painful, having to be so cruel in loving her as I did. When their engagement ultimately ended after 13 months, Olsen asked Kierkegaard if he would ever get married. Yes, in 10 years' time, I will need a lusty girl to rejuvenate me, he told her in an attempt to drive her away from him forever. She asked him to kiss her, and he did, but without passion. Merciful God, he remarked. Regine went on to marry John Friedrich Fritz Schlegel, the former teacher she had been seeing before Kierkegaard's proposal. Kierkegaard was forever troubled by his betrayal of Regine. He worried that she would go out of her mind if she found out how things really were. For the next decade and a half, Kierkegaard buried himself in his religious writings. He never did marry a lusty girl. In his will, Kierkegaard left everything that he owned to Regine, since he believed that their engagement was still as binding as a marriage. Her husband had a very different interpretation and declined the inheritance on Regine's behalf. In his own words, always on his mind. To devote oneself to another person completely, the lover must drop his or her defenses. This leaves lovers in a vulnerable position. Kierkegaard believed that lovers are never truly alone in their quests, since God is always looking out for them. The one who in love forgets himself, forgets his suffering. In order to think of someone else's forgets all of his misery. In order to think of someone else's, forgets what he himself loses. In order lovingly to bear in mind someone else's loss, forgets his own advantage. In order lovingly to think of someone else's, truly such a person is not forgotten. There is one who is thinking about him, God in heaven. John Locke. All right, John Locke. Sexy guy, look at that. All nose, all brain. There is no necessity in the nature of marriage, nor to the ends of it, that it should always be for life. Thomas Jefferson once wrote that English philosopher John Locke was one of the 3 greatest men that have ever lived, without any exception. As a political theorist, Locke laid the philosophical foundations for the United States Constitution with his writings on individual freedom and property rights. Okay, first of all, a lot of that was inspired by Thomas Paine, but I will let this kind of slide. In his pursuit of the political, Locke sacrificed the personal. He never married or had any children of his own. The charming Locke certainly befriended many women over the years. It is apparent that at least some of them wanted to be more than just his pen pals, something that Locke was too aloof to recognize. The language he used toward his friend Eleanor Perry, for instance, was tinged with the glow of romance. In the beginning, he described her as robbing me of the use of my reason, adding that love is a fire and flame is full of heat and warmth. They exchanged flirtatious letters for a couple of years, but he never took any definitive steps towards courting her, even though Perry hinted on several occasions that Locke was free to reveal his passions. When subtlety proved useless, she boldly asked if he was now indifferent of the affection you have framed in my soul. Immediately, Locke's letter lost their flirtatiousness. In her final letter, Perry wrote, "How hard is it for you to disguise your thoughts and your soul to one that knows it so well as I do? You love me still. We will meet, I believe, in the next world, since we will not in this." Locke's longest friendship was with Damaris Cudworth. They first began corresponding with each other in 1682 when she was 23 and he was 49 years old. After Cudworth became engaged to Sir Francis Masham, she wrote to Locke that a mutual friend told her that "you love me exceedingly." She was really vexed by this and clearly hoped to draw out Locke's true feelings for her. Locke, who was in Holland at the time, did not ride in on a horseback and carry her away. Instead, he penned a letter which she received on the day of her wedding while she didn't save it. The letter was not the declaration of true love that Cudworth had been hoping for, and so she walked down the aisle and into her new role as a wife and a mother. Later, the newly christened Lady Masham emphasized that the intellectual bond that she shared with Locke would not be destroyed by her marriage. The objects of all my thoughts are of an immortal nature, and such without doubt is friendship. While Locke was still in Holland, Lady Masham gave birth to her only child. Locke returned to England in 1691, and Lady Masham invited him to live in her home. It can safely be assumed that there was no hanky-panky going on, as Locke was in poor health during the final years of his life. In a letter to a friend, Locke wrote, "I do not find that my age has much inclined me to the thoughts of love. My health is the only mistress." Locke lived with the Mashams until his death in 1704. He left his estate to Masham's son, Francis Cudworth Masham. The epitaph on Locke's gravestone reads in part, "His virtues, if indeed he had any, were too slight to be lauded by him, or to be an example to you. Let his vices be buried with him." In his own words, "My baby don't mess around." John Locke believed that a man in love exemplifies humankind's capacity for self-deception. Sometimes the force of a clear argument may make some impression, yet they nevertheless stand firm and keep out the enemy, truth, that would captivate or disturb them. Tell a man passionately in love that he is jilted. Bring a score of witnesses of the falsehood of his mistress. It is 10-1, but 3 kinds of words of hers shall invalidate all their testimonies. Titus Lucretius, from 99 to 55 BC. It is easier to avoid the snares of love than to escape once you are in that net. Alright. Titus Lucretius. That's such a cool name. Roman philosopher Titus Lucretius' the Roman philosopher Titus Lucretius's only surviving work is a philosophical poem on the nature of things, and little is known about Lucretius's life. Except for gossip and speculation, the most persistent legend involves a woman scorned, poison, hallucinations, and suicide, all key ingredients for ripping yarn. Women are meretricious, as women are meretricious schemers who lay snares. Damn, men have just hated women since like the dawn of time, I'm pretty sure. They're like, if I can't bone it, it's evil. And if I can bone it, it's evil. Alright, his opinion was supposedly based on personal experience, related in the legend of the love potion, first transcribed by Jerome in the 4th century. Lucretius's wife, Lucilla, Lucia or Lucilla? Lucia. I feel like Lucia sounds better, but it might be Lucilla. Tired of being ignored as her husband worked on his poetry, employed a witch to brew a love potion. However, things did not go quite as planned. When Lucretius ingested the potion, he experienced horrifying visions of the Epicurean universe with atoms colliding randomly in the void. According to author Lord Tennyson, instead of falling deeply in love with his wife, Lucretius fell in love with the highest Epicurean virtue of tranquility. Lucretius addressed the divine tranquility directly in a series of books written during the intervals of his insanity, but never receiving a response from the universe, committed suicide at the age of 44 by driving a knife into his own side. In his own words, "Now I ain't saying she a gold digger." Sex was morally acceptable for Lucretius, only so long as love was not involved. The man who finds himself in love is simply walking wounded. a slave to his lover's passions. It's funny, this makes sense to me, as much as I hate that it makes sense to me, but it makes sense that sex would be morally acceptable as long as love was not involved. Because sex and love are separate things, you know, and like, I feel like in our even if you are in a loving relationship, some aspects of that love need to be separate from the physical, you know, like, how do I put this without sounding like a dick? Like, sex is a unifying thing, right? It's beautiful, it's whatever. I don't personally feel that you need love for sex to be effective or to get you in the energetic or mind space that you need to be in. They pine away with wounds that none can see. Remember, too, their strength still wastes away. Their labor not avails, their life is lived at another's beck and call. Their money goes wasted on Babylonian coverlets, or a robe or dresses, or to a robe or dresses. Friedrich Nietzsche. I know y'all were waiting on this mustache. Oh, women. They make the highs higher and the lows more frequent. Same could be said about men. Okay. German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche was a lifelong bachelor whose misogynistic ranting did not dissuade women from approaching him. Which is funny. A lot of these philosophers who fail at love are all misogynistic. Maybe we can learn a lesson here. Maybe don't hate women and your love life won't suck. I don't know. If you're at least sexually attracted to women, it might help to like them. German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche was a lifelong bachelor. Because his philosophy bore the reputation of being blasphemous and indecent, he was quite a hero in the pump rooms and on the piazzas of many watering places. Journalist H.L. Mencken wrote, Nietzsche failed to capitalize on his opportunities for romance, however, choosing to direct his affection toward women who were disinterested in him. Sounds like a man after my own heart. Nietzsche first fell in love at the age of 32 with Mathilde Trempedak. After their second encounter, Nietzsche sent her a marriage proposal in the mail. Very romantic. I like your style, Nietzsche. I like your style. Will you become my wife? I love you and I feel as if you already belong to me. Do you not believe as I do that in a union each will become freer and better than in singleness? Well then, Excelsior. Trempedak, already in love with another man, declined Nietzsche's libido shrunk, I have to redo that. Trempedak, already in love with another man, declined. Nietzsche's libido shrunk into hiding for the next 5 years. In 1882, Nietzsche met the 21-year-old Russian Lou von Salom in Zurich, and he wrote that she is plain, but like all plain girls, she has cultivated her mind in order to be attractive. And while Nietzsche, the philosopher, captivated her, Nietzsche, the lover, was less than compelling. Salom turned down multiple marriage offers from him. Nietzsche's sister, Elizabeth, wrote an angry letter to Salome, defending her brother's wounded pride. Salome replied, Don't think that I have any designs upon your brother, that I'm in love with him. I could sleep in the same room with him and not have any thoughts of arousal. When Salome became enraged to another man, several years later, Nietzsche told a friend that he wished her much happiness and prosperity, although he refused to write to her. One must keep out of the way of the kind of creature who does not understand awe and respect. Their mutual friend, Paul Ray, was amused by the whole situation, remarking that he did not see how Salome could have kissed Nietzsche with the philosopher's bushy mustache in the way. Nietzsche once claimed in jest that he had never touched a woman. In truth, he engaged in intercourse on several occasions on doctor's orders. Unfortunately, a stable relationship with a woman was not meant to be. For me to marry, Nietzsche wrote, would probably be sheer asinine. It would be asinine. Okay. uh, in his later years, Nietzsche descended into madness as a result of syphilitic infection, which very probably stemmed from his doctor-ordered encounters. Nietzsche was originally treated for syphilis in his early 20s and suffered from chronic health problems, poor eyesight, headaches, vomiting, and fatigue in the intervening years that were further evidence of infection. On January 3rd, 1889, Nietzsche experienced a severe psychotic break on the streets of Turin. After witnessing a horse being whipped, he threw his arms around the beast and collapsed at his feet. 2 policemen arrived on scene to find Nietzsche babbling and incoherent. He never recovered his sanity during the final 11 years of his life. In his own words, the Great Repression. Nietzsche vehemently criticized the Victorian era's repression of all things sexual. The church fights passion by cutting it out in every sense, its practice, its therapy, its castration. He wrote, it was Christianity on the basis of its resentment against life that first made something unclean out of sexuality. I completely agree. Ironic sentiments for a man whose health continually suffered due to the lingering effects of STDs. However, I still agree with him. I still agree. You know, like, Christianity really did castrate the beauty of physical connection. I'm going to take a break here, and I will be back.